The movie begins in Virginia, where the high school astronomy club gathered at night to observe the stars with telescopes. Leo Biederman gets confused because he noticed something in the sky and couldn't identify it, so the teacher asked him to photograph it to send the pictures to a professional astronomer. The pictures reached an observatory in Arizona, where Dr. Wolf used his massive telescope to confirm the information. Unfortunately, he discovered the presence of a comet that would collide with Earth. He immediately tried to send the information by email, but the server was down, so instead, he put the information on a disk. He named the comet Wolf-Biederman. After that, Wolf descended from the mountain, still trying to reach the authorities on his mobile phone, but his messages went to voicemail. Meanwhile, a trailer was coming from the opposite direction. The driver got distracted when a cigarette accidentally dropped on his leg. Since Wolf was also distracted by his mobile phone, they didn't see each other and collided. Wolf's car fell off the mountain and burned. A year later in Washington, news researcher Jenny is pleading with her boss to let her become a newscaster, but her boss refuses as usual and instead asks her to investigate the sudden resignation of the Secretary of Treasury. During lunch, Jenny met her mother Robin, who told her that Jason remarried and had twins. Later, Jenny spoke with the deputy minister, who had resigned after a discussion with the president regarding someone he suspected was a mistress named Eli. Jenny caught the minister as he was boarding a supply-filled boat with his family. When she mentioned Eli, he froze and asked for compassion, explaining he resigned to be with family. As Jenny drove back, her car was surrounded and halted by black vehicles from the Secret Service. They transferred her to their car and took her to a restaurant where President Beck was waiting. In their conversation, she realized the secret wasn't about Eli, but the first letters. Beck explained that he would talk about this matter within 2 days at a press conference and asked her not to say anything until that time, promising that she would get the first question as a reward. When she returned to the office, Jenny searched for the term ELE online and discovered on a biology site that ELE stands for Extinction Level Event, referring to the comet that killed the dinosaurs. That night, Jenny met her father Jason and his new wife, who were upset that she didn't attend their party. They even gave her a gift, but Jenny couldn't stop thinking about the impending disaster. After drinking heavily, she told her father to go back to Robin and left the place. On the day of the conference, Jenny's boss was in the last row, and Jenny herself was in the second row. President Beck told everyone about the Wolf-Biederman comet, which is larger than Mount Everest and will hit the Earth in a year. America has collaborated with Russia to build a spacecraft called Messiah to intercept and blow up the comet. Beck also introduced the Messiah crew, who appeared in a video conference to explain how they would land the spacecraft on the comet to plant warheads. The president urged everyone to continue their lives as normal and not to hoard food or supplies. Thus, all salaries and prices will be frozen as promised. Beck chose Jenny to pose the first question, so she stood up and asked 3, including the issue of the minister's resignation. Beck acknowledged that humanity's survival was at risk, but urged calm as victory was likely. Another reporter inquired about the discoverers, to which Beck explained that the scientists who found the comet died in a car accident. At home, Leo's family recognized the name and wondered if it involved them. Soon, neighbors gathered at their house, seeking answers. A few days later, Leo was in all the newspapers and magazines. He held a press conference at his school and explained what really happened. All the kids felt he was a hero. Meanwhile, the Messias team held a party to enjoy a happy day with their families before preparing for training. That night, they discussed the mission's risks due to the comet's perihelion period. The crew only had 7 hours to land on the comet before sunrise and needed to work quickly because if the comet reached sunlight, there would be dangerous gas explosions. 2 months later, the crew finally departed Earth on a spacecraft heading to the station. The building of Messias was covered by all news channels, explaining that Messias was originally a project named Orion, developed by the Russians for nuclear war. It operates on a prototype nuclear propulsion system, which allows the crew to reach the comet before it approaches Earth. The crew successfully transitioned from the spacecraft to Messias, and now they have a long journey ahead to find the comet. After 5 months, reporters worldwide prepared to cover Messias's landing. Jenny was surprised to learn she would finally be an anchor since she broke the news. Meanwhile, the crew finally saw the comet, astonished by its size, and began carefully maneuvering the warheads in zero gravity. On Earth, Jenny explained to viewers that Messias would fly through the comet's tail, which is filled with rocks, sand, and ice. Soon, Messias started flying through the tail, and the pilots exerted maximum effort to avoid all potential hazards. However, there were many large rocks, and Messias got hit a few times. Fortunately, the damages were minor, and Messiah safely landed on the comet. Now, the crew has just 6 hours and 18 minutes to complete the mission before sunrise. The astronauts ventured out with special equipment, which immediately began drilling. In the initial hours, things were good, but suddenly the drill malfunctioned. The hole they made so far is not deep enough for the warheads to do real damage. Someone has to go down and fix the drill to complete the mission, and now there are 20 minutes left. The pilots on the craft notice the crew is taking too long and won't have time to return. They decided to fly closer to rescue them, even though it means they won't have enough fuel to get back to Earth. Commander Munak went down the hole and discovered it opens into a cave, which caused the drill to malfunction. After much effort, Monash managed to escape and hastily climbed out of the hole. The pilots, arriving with a vehicle, landed nearby to conserve fuel. Unfortunately, as time ran out and daylight broke through, the astronauts shielded their faces from the sun. A sudden gas explosion pushed Monash out before he could cover his face, causing a burn. The bait secured him with a stabilizing wire, allowing them to rush towards the vehicle. Continuing gas explosions tragically sent the doctor into space, and the rest of the crew reached the militia just in time, and the vehicle took off before the temperature increased. Monash was in a miserable state and couldn't see, so now Captain Tanner is in charge. The ground received the mission update. The crew planted the warheads, but they lost one in the process. Jenny read a few words to honor the memory of the doctor. After that, when the mission was at a safe distance, the crew detonated the warheads. The shockwave from the explosion reached the vehicle, causing it to shake wildly and cutting off its communication with the ground. The astronauts rushed to minimize the damage. They prevented any fire before it started and helped the vehicle stabilize quickly. After that, they quickly decided what they would do. Due to the damage to the vehicle, they agreed to head back home. Moments later, President Beck received bad news and had to share it with the nation as discreetly as possible. It turned out that detonating the warheads only succeeded in splitting the comet in two, and the pieces were still large enough to cause catastrophic damage to Earth. The two pieces were heading toward Earth, and NASA lost all contact with the Messiah, so no one knew if the crew was still alive. Beck announced that the government was digging caves into the cliffs of Missouri to use as a shelter capable of housing 1 million people. Enough animals and plants to repopulate the Earth after everything is over. 200,000 people were chosen, including leaders, doctors, scientists, engineers, teachers, soldiers, and artists. Details of the lottery procedure were sent to Jenny, who shared them on her program. The lottery draw will take place in August, and the winners will be selected by Social Security numbers. But everyone over 50 can't participate unless they are among the selected scientists to rebuild later. Leo's family was then contacted and told they are part of the chosen group. Now, there are only 4 weeks left before the collision, and Jenny visited Robin. Those who won't participate in the lottery, Jenny admitted she saw it as unfair because she was chosen just because she's a journalist. At the same time, Leo proposed to his girlfriend Sarah so she could legally be part of his family and come to the shelter. Sarah didn't want to leave her family behind, but Leo promised he would use his fame to bring them. As the days passed, everyone in the town fell into a daze, and thieves started setting fire to abandoned shops. No one tried to extinguish the flames because the firefighters were busy preparing shelters. The rest of the world wasn't doing well either. Major cities in Latin America were overrun by looting gangs, and people in Moscow were fighting over food and fuel as shortages continued, 2 weeks before the collision. Tanner organized the finances before checking on Mona, whose face was free of burns, but eyes remained injured. Occasionally, she could see only a dim light. Tanner read to her for entertainment. During evacuation, the National Guard approved his family and Sarah's inclusion, but not Sarah's family, despite Leo's plea. Sarah chose to stay with her family, witnessing the bus take Leo away. Meanwhile, Jenny learned Robin had ended her life and retrieved her belongings from the morgue, grieving in the rain. Jason came to take her, revealing his wife left to hide with her family. Jenny told him that she feels like an orphan before she left the place alone in a taxi. After that, and 5 days before the collision, the people they chose and the animals they rescued arrived at the refuge in the Limestone Grove in Missouri, at a gathering. Harsa requested them to stay longer. Leo saw the desperate people who brought their babies and heard Jundo say that they would stay at this refuge for 2 years. He refused to continue without Sarah, so Leo took his family, Jerry, to rescue his wife. At the news station, Jason brought pictures of her childhood to Jenny and said goodbye to her permanently. And he left her crying. That night, NASA launched a series of rockets known as Titans to destroy the comet, and Jenny followed their course on her news broadcast. After 14 hours, Beck announced the results. The rockets failed, so humanity must prepare for the collision. The small comet was named Biedermann, and it will strike in 12 hours near Cape Hatteras in the Atlantic Ocean, which means tsunamis will hit the eastern coast of the United States and destroy major cities like New York and Philadelphia. The larger part of the comet was named Wolf, and it will land in western Canada after a few hours. This will be the true extinction event, and for 2 days after the collision, the dust and debris will fill the sky, making it dark for 2 years. Without sunlight, all plants and animals will die. 10 hours before the collision, Tanner finished his calculations and announced that he had a plan. They can't do anything about the Biedermann piece, but he's confident they can stop the main comet, Wolf, to save humanity. Since the gas explosions on the comet created a huge chute, they can reach the center of the comet, place the remaining warheads in the chute, and blow the comet into small pieces. Messiah doesn't have enough fuel. Unable to leave the comet, they will die after launching the spacecraft. Hard to accept, but the crew has no choice. They reached out to Houston and shared their plan to inspire hope. On Earth, Leo came home only to find Sarah's family gone. Recalling Sarah's dad had a bicycle, he took it to escape the jammed streets quickly. Traffic was heavy, but the bike let Leo weave through cars. Finding Sarah and her family, they urged her to take her brother. The trio pedaled away as Sarah's family watched and cried from afar. At the news station, journalists prepared by grabbing rods. They had to decide who'd go with Jenny to the shelter. She felt guilty because her boss had a daughter, so when the helicopter arrived, Jenny let them go in her place. She then went to the beach to find Jason and reconcile with him. Meanwhile, worldwide, people saw Biedermann falling from the sky, crashing into the Atlantic Ocean, causing a massive explosion and darkening the sky. A towering tsunami swept over New York, collapsing thousands of buildings and killing countless. Jenny and Jason embraced on the beach as they met their end. The Statue of Liberty's destruction left its head floating among debris, and water reached the nearby road. People abandoned their cars and tried to flee in panic to find higher ground. Sarah's family stayed behind, choosing to die with dignity. Leo, Sarah, and the baby were still running to the hill, but soon had to leave the bike and continue on foot like everyone else. 2 minutes before impact, NASA connected the Messiah team with their families for a last goodbye. Unfortunately, Monash's wife was stuck in traffic and couldn't reach in time. Tanner had 2 children in naval service and couldn't reach them, so he prayed to his deceased wife, telling them they'd meet soon as NASA was about to end the transmission. Monash's wife arrived with the baby, and Monash was finally able to say goodbye. Then, the countdown began. Team members shared their last words with each other as Messiah entered the comet's orbit and went into the fissure in time. The warheads exploded, and the comet broke into millions of tiny pieces. On the ground, Leo and Sarah reached the top of the hill and saw the small pieces covering the sky like fireworks. A couple of days later, after the Atlantic Ocean had calmed, Beck gave a speech acknowledging all the lost lives across the continents and asked people to remember these losses as they work to rebuild their future. That's the end of the film, and we'll meet again in a new summary. Thank you for watching.